Welcome to the CSBP Fertilisers Grow Better Podcast, sharing knowledge with growers on leading crop nutrition, sustainable agriculture and other issues impacting the agricultural industry.
G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of the CSBP Grow Better Podcast. My name's Johnston and I'm very pleased to be joined today by not one but two supply chain managers at CSBP. Now, listeners who are familiar to the podcast will have probably seen a few episodes we've done with our former supply chain manager, Rusty Burke, and stepping into his very capable shoes, we've got Mark Robinson and Jonathan Hams. Robbo, Hamsy, g'day and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Greg. Good to be here.
And look, we're very pleased to have you on deck in the role of supply chain manager and on deck with the podcast. As is our tradition on the show, please, can you introduce yourselves to the audience?
Sure. I'll go first. Mark Robinson. My previous role was a product manager. So I spent a lot of the time involved in the forecasting, pricing and product management. I guess in a previous gig, I had a bit of experience with the deep water trade and with the previous job at product manager, I had a little bit of procurement as well. So it was always sort of a part of the work history, and I really, to be honest, I enjoyed doing deals and working with suppliers. So I was attracted to the role when it became available.
Very exciting. And Hamsy?
Yeah, thanks, Gray. Well, currently I'm transitioning from a regional sales manager role. So the role, it's basically leading teams that are selling and providing nutrition advice to customers. I look after a few customers myself, and in previous roles with CSBP, I've been an account manager down at Narrogin and a product manager role that Mark's transitioned from. So I've been with CSBP for quite a number of years now.
Very good. And look, great to have you on deck. We're clearly, on the basis of that introduction, going to be talking all things supply chain and procurement today. And I imagine in supply chain world, it's been a pretty busy few months getting ourselves set up for the season to come. Can you tell us how last season played out and how we're getting ourselves set up for this year?
Yeah, sure. So I guess from a procurement perspective, last season went fairly smoothly. I guess there were some challenges when the whole state had a good to fair start to the year, which had some challenges, everyone chasing nitrogen at the same time. Unfortunately, the season fell away and fell away quickly in a lot of areas. We had a few black swan events. The most, I think, one that comes to mind
is a few black swan events.
The one that comes to mind is the cargo where they found, I think it was over half a tonne of cocaine, just off the WA coast.
What was our price on that one, Robert?
Well, a bit more than fertiliser. The implications was I think it was a big operation from what I believe. Australian Federal Police, Border Force, Department of Home Affairs and WA Police, they actually took control of the wharf for 2 weeks while they were unloading this vessel. So that was one of the issues which caused some delays.
And so that wasn't our vessel, but it held up.
No,
held up shipping at our.
It caused some congestion.
Yeah.
I think we were able to divert some of these ships to our different ports, but nonetheless caused some delays.
Great example of some of the things that can happen in I guess when we're importing a million tonnes of bulk commodity every year. Hamsy, any reflections from you?
Well, I guess previous year I was sort of on the sales side with customers, and I think the planning for 2024 has been underway for a long way. From the sales side, the team have been gathering forecasts with growers since probably the Darren Newdigate Field Day time back in August. Mm-hmm. But as I'm stepping into the supply chain role, picking up a lot of the work's been done. So the ammonium phosphates and the potash, a lot of the products either here or it's on the water at the moment. The pre-fill Flexion, that product's here and that's going out now. And I guess the challenge now is to get the product off the vessels and get growers to pick it up. That is the goal.
And look, I mean, it's a good indicator of the lead times involved in the industry, right? And the fact that the products are all on the water or ordered and on the way is a good indication of why we do need to do that forecast effort so early. Absolutely.
And we were just talking this morning, a granulation plant started in September, so our first ships arrived before that. So it's really 12 months in the making, and our forecast with suppliers have been with them for a long time.
So that leads us nicely, I guess. Maybe Robbo, can you give us a picture of what we're focused on to make sure we can provide great reliability to the WA market this year?
Sure. So it's really really a risk mitigation approach. So, and it's got a bunch of different aspects there. So suppliers. So I suppose this year we have more resources dedicated to maintaining those supplier relationships. So that's regularly talking forecasts with them. I think the idea there is to lead off or jump on the front foot if there are any problems that do arrive, interruption to the supply, we can know about it earlier and make some changes to get around that. Constant dialogue is part of the process. So regular contact with the suppliers weekly at the moment, and that'll stay the way till at least we're through the busy season. And so aside from applying more resources to manage those relationships, it's investing more in our SCP, so our supply chain planning process, really to optimise the assets we have to efficiently manage the cargo timing and disports against the demand.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess that process continues through to making sure that throughout the state, as seasonal conditions change, as rainfall might change, we're frantically moving product or making sure product's in the right depots around the state.
That's exactly right, and that's we build in flexibility into timing of not only supply but timing, but the variability of the season there. That's the fun part of when there's some scrambling from time to time when things go wrong, but it's that adjusting to that variability is where the work's done.
And Hamsy, Robbo talked there, I guess, about optimising the assets that we do have, and we're lucky at CSBP. We've got a brilliant collection of physical assets to import, store, dispatch fertiliser, and that helps us provide reliability to growers. You want to talk a little bit about some of the efforts we've been doing there and playing with the product range as well?
Yeah, because spot on that. I mean, you've got a finite storage volume to use. So number one is looking at the product range, because it'd be lovely to have every product under the sun available, but it's just not possible. So the range rationalisation and the reviews happen annually. They've taken place again, and it's maintaining a balance between what customers expect and need in their ranges. So that range rationalisation's happened. We're continuing with extra storage at our outer ports and bringing in nitrogen earlier. And as we've seen in recent years, there's just more and more nitrogen being required, and the window to collect it is getting narrower. So that's making sure we've got more product earlier. Something I alluded to a bit earlier, just forecasting with growers, and that's how we build our demand plan, and that starts with the growers, and that drives our production procurement plan. So I guess that constant dialogue is critical, whether it be with our customers or our suppliers, and certainly with the operations teams, to make sure we're picking up trends as they happen.
And you've both talked a bit about suppliers there. You've now split up, I think, our supply portfolio between the two of you.
Correct.
So you're maintaining those relationships. We're lucky at CSBP. We've got some really nice long-term relationships with our suppliers. I guess, Hamsy, can you tell us a little bit about your relationships and the way we manage them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess in former roles, I've been, privileged to deal with suppliers with some, really product development projects. And as I'm transitioning into this role, a number of those relationships are still in place, and we believe that those long-term relationships pay dividends. With one of our phosphate suppliers and our potash suppliers, we've been customers of those companies for multiple decades. And I guess what that leads to, we both understand the drivers of each other's businesses. There's good understanding when problems happen on either side, and we need to call on favours or to get extensions and these types of things. And we've also moved away from countries with geopolitical risk, just for risk mitigation, as Robbo referred to a bit earlier. And as I'm sort of entering the new role, there's constant dialogue with these suppliers on a weekly basis. So we're calling out potential issues, and equally so are they. So it's just so there's no surprises and we're all on the same page.
For people who aren't close to it, we have talked a little bit about this on the show before. Can you paint a quick picture of the main nutrients and where the supply locations are for CSBP?
Where we source from.
Yeah.
So nitrogen, largely the Middle East or Southeast Asia. That they supply, not only us, but most of Australia pull from those locations. Our phosphates, historically, Australia's pulled roughly 50% out of China. We tend to pull some out of the Middle East and the US. And then potash.
Part of that is that geopolitical risk that Hamsy referred
correct.
to?
Yep. Potash, Canada and some out of Germany.
So across that international portfolio of suppliers then, Hamzy, what are we hearing from them at the moment, and what are some of the big issues that I guess we're focused on and therefore might be of interest to the growers listening into this podcast?
Yeah, well, for what's a relatively quiet month in ag in WA, most people coming back from holidays, you look internationally, we've still got the Middle East conflict going. We've got the issues with ships trying to traverse the Red Sea and some having to go up through the Suez and around the Panama, which adds essentially a fortnight to the sailing time. There's upcoming Indonesian elections, which is seeing Indonesia join China on the sidelines of urea exports. And there's another Indian tender coming up. So this follows the one that happened over New Year. So there's plenty of international events happening which do impact supply or international supply.
And are any of those likely at this stage to have much spillover into CSBP and procurement program for the year?
Probably just thinking about the nitrogen there. If you take China, for example, going back a few years, they would supply up to 40% of the global traded urea. Now, more recently, they haven't been exporting. There is rumours that they will commence exporting in March this year. So if they do, the supply side will see some ease, and which may have a follow-on with pricing. Yeah.
One of the things we also often hear about in fertiliser world is shipping and freight rates and ship sourcing. Where's that at the moment? And I know there was big disruptions during the COVID. How's that market playing out, and how do we normally play in that market?
Well, generally we use vessels that are less than 10 years old, which essentially less breakdowns, greater reliability. There have been issues with cranes in the past, so we test at loading. And they're all level 1 vessels, and that's as determined by DAF, so that's the Department of Ag, Forestry and Fishing, and that's for risk mitigation again. So that means they've had no previous organic matter in carted essentially, so there's no grain contamination, for example, in the fertiliser. So, but I guess coming into or through the 2023 season, the shipping prices and availability had eased from the highs we'd seen in through 2021 and 22.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And shipping availability at the moment is reasonably good?
Yeah, there's no issues at the moment. Freight rates have come back to sort of historic averages, or in the ballpark of, so there's no issues on that front.
But I guess still at CSBP we're procuring a larger total quantum of ships, right, if we're importing more fert? Yeah.
And I probably like to think about this as a numbers game or as percentages. So we might have many ships, but typically they have 2 or 3 disports each vessel. And from a risk mitigation, something always goes wrong, but with a large bunch of vessels with many disports, it gives you the flexibility and options to actually shuffle them around if there happens to be an issue or a delay with one vessel. You can switch the other one out to plug a gap, so to speak.
And one of you name-checked the Grand Plant before, and we love talking about the Grand Plant, the Super Plant and Flexien manufacture here on the podcast. What's happening with our manufacturing program this year, and can you give us some insight into how that's shaping up?
Yeah, so we're well underway. So you look at our 3 production plants at Kwinana. The Grand Plant's been running since September, so raw materials have arrived before that. A lot of the ag products are made, the K-Till, the macros are being made, and the Gran NS, the nitrogen products we made sort of later in the season. Super plant, all of our superphosphate products have been manufactured so that they're on the floor and ready to make. And with Flexien, just a reminder to our listeners that we running a combined local manufacture and import model. So our imported product comes from the States, and we're manufacturing year round at Geraldton and Esperance, and at Kwinana as well, on and off. So all 3 plants, or 2 plants running, the Grand Plant and the Flexien plant, and the Super's all being manufactured. So from a procurement perspective, most of the raw materials have been here for a little while.
So of that manufactured range, I guess, are we seeing any particular interest across particular products in that range this season?
We've had strong demand for the Macro Pro range. Mm-hmm. That's gone well.
And Macro Pro, just for anyone who's not familiar with it?
That's a SOP-based NPK compound. Mm-hmm.
And I guess demand for that is probably supported by some of the potassium drawdown numbers we're seeing in the soil testing?
Yeah, that's right. There's been, if we go back a couple of big years drawing out potassium. Soil K is very low, so we're starting to see that replenishment.
To follow that up, Robbo, a lot of growers are testing paddocks on a 3 or 4 year rotation, and some paddocks we're seeing early data coming through from soil tests. And the last time they were sampled was probably 2020, and the state's taken off an enormous amount of grain in that time. So, yeah, some of the early results we're seeing, sort of peas being depleted, K's certainly been depleted, and with the dry summer and no rain since probably late spring, there's next to no nitrogen in the soil as well. So it's it's probably no surprise, but the evidence is there.
So from a procurement perspective, it's almost like we anticipated that outcome and knew that those nutrients would be required.
Well, I guess in a sense, yes, because the data we're seeing is the growers' worst fears or their expectations have been realised. And as I was saying, we've been getting grower forecasts since the spring. So it was expected, and that's what we're forecasting and procuring for.
In grain export world, I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is the bottleneck is very much shifting to the port. And I think that seems to be happening in Fert world at the moment, right? We've got a fixed instantaneous import capacity, and therefore storage is, becoming even more and more important, because if we want to be able to serve the industry with more volumes but fixed import capacity, someone's got to store it at some point. Tell us a little bit about storage, Robbo, and the importance of storage at CSBP.
Sure. So between Kwinana, well, actually all their works located on the ports, there's roughly 400,000 tonne under roof. And look, yeah, we've invested recently, a few years ago, into flexi-end storage. We renewing leases at our outer ports for basically to address this nitrogen demand. We'll fill it to the rafters, then it'll empty, and then we'll fill it a couple of times more to meet the nitrogen demand. But those lease storages at the country works were in response to increased nitrogen demand and to meet the customer's demand.
We're going to fill it to the rafters, and I guess the efficiency of which we get the product off the ships and into the storage is therefore very important as well. We've been making some investments in that area, Robert?
Yeah, that's right. So replaced our conveyor system, basically from the wharf into our shed. Quite a long project, an expensive project, just to future-proof unloading off the wharf.
Yeah, and I guess ensure really good reliability there as well.
Yep.
So, Hamzy, Robbo, you've given us a really nice, overview of procurement at CSBP, how we manage our suppliers, how we think about forecasting, and it seems like you're both settling into your new roles really nicely. You talked about just 1 or 2 or 3 black swan events last year. What keeps you awake at night, and what should what are we really focused on leading into what are going to be a critical few months for the industry?
What keeps me awake is missing something. So we put a lot of emphasis in the planning, which, as you described, comes from the forecast. But just if I miss anything, if I forget to
order a ship,
mention something to a supplier, and we just forget a step in the whole planning process. I guess that's what I wake up at silly hours in the morning, rethinking what I've done and what I've missed.
Hamzy, you feeling confident about the season to come?
Well, yes, yeah.
That's the right answer.
But quickly learning, a lot of the suppliers were on the other side of the world. So generally with customers, you're speaking to them during daylight hours. But you've got comms coming through at all hours of the day. So I think to Robbo's point, there's a lot of traffic, and you've just got to make sure you're on the ball and addressing everything that comes through, because it might not be critical, or it could be super critical. So. Yes.
And look, clearly, if we've learned anything over the last couple of years, it's watch this space. Markets are volatile, but at CSBP, we've got a capable team who are keeping their eye on those things and working very closely with those long-term suppliers to make sure we manage those disruptions as best we can on behalf of the industry in WA.
We adapt as the problems arise, and we solve each one one at a time.
And I think the nice thing about the long-term relationships we have with our customers as well is we can really neatly communicate with them and make sure that any problems that do come up are addressed as easily as they can be.
Absolutely, and I think, as I was saying, some of these decade-long relationships with suppliers, they're generations long relationship with customers. So that dialogue goes all the way from, the farm gate, the farm table, all the way to our international suppliers. So it works very well.
And on that bombshell, that is a brilliant way to wrap up our discussion on procurement with our new supply chain managers. So thank you very much, Robbo and Hamzy, for joining us on the show.
Thanks, Gray.
Thanks, Gray. Not a problem.
And thank you all out there in podcast world for joining us on another episode of the CSBP Grow Better podcast. Remember, you can stay in touch with all the things happening at CSBP Fertilisers by following us at CSBP Fertilisers on all your favourite social platforms. Until next time, I've been Gray Johnston. Thank you, Mark Robinson. Thank you, Jonathan Hams. See you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning into another episode of the CSBP Grow Better podcast. For more information about CSBP, please visit csbp-fertilisers.com.au or connect with us on social media at CSBP Fertilisers on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn.